they don't have any answer about how to deal with the debt. They can't deal with the debt within the constraints of the debt money monetary system. The debt money monetary system's money is created as debt. It only exists while you're in debt. When the debt is paid off, the money doesn't exist, so we have to be in debt, personally and through our government. Conservatives want a sound fiscal policy. They want to stop deficit spending. They would love to pay off the federal debt, but they don't have a clue how to do that. But the NEED Act does all of this. So it should appeal to more than just my friends that stand on a street corner with me advocating for social justice and against wars. Social justice issue, poverty, austerity, inequality, environmental crises, an undemocratic democracy. This is the senator, I would say our senator. Actually, I just live over the state line in Indiana, so he's not my senator. He's Stephen's senator, though, Richard Durbin, who made the statement, frankly, the banks own the place, and the place he had referred to in the sentence prior to this was Congress. The banks own Congress. And why do they own Congress? They get to create our money and determine what it's used for. So these are issues that are affecting us. Unemployment, debt. What's this? Linking social justice to monetary reform. I did a pamphlet. We've got it on the back. I've got a bunch more of them up here. So everybody grab one before they leave, trying to address the issue of social justice and monetary reform. A friend of mine makes these up, and he sends them out to prisoners. Not just my pamphlet, but pamphlets that the prisoners write and things like this, and all sorts of ones. I've written a few others that they send out, and they get requests from prisoners all over the country. 20, 30, 40, 50 requests every day or every other day when they go to the mail and send all these pamphlets out. Great work. So there it is right there, linking social justice to monetary reform. A couple of years ago, I was interviewed on a local radio station, and I gave the interviewer some material that I'd written beforehand, and he read it. So I kind of wanted to talk. It wasn't about monetary reform. It was an anti-war thing. And he said, well, you're advocating for social justice. Everybody that called up, and it's all conservatives that listen to the station too, they all called up and they wanted to talk about social justice, and they all thought it was some kind of a scam or whatever it was. But anyway, so what I did was I had to kind of rethink how I address social justice. I don't think I did it, the subject justice, on that radio show, so I've been trying to clean up my act. You can't have social justice unless you have economic justice. Does that make sense? I mean, how can we have an unjust economic system and not have social justice? So economic justice, just monetary system, and that is the NEED Act, ladies and gentlemen. That's how we get social justice. Here's some of the things it does. Creates at minimum 10 million new good-paying jobs, rebuilding our country's crumbling infrastructure. Gives every man, woman, and child a citizen's dividend that should be substantial, could be $10,000. And what is this? I'm a former small businessman. This is a bailout for small businesses because small businesses don't need another loan. They don't need more loans. What they need you, your family, your friends to have money in their pockets for their goods and services. Commits to funding education and health care. It sends new money to the states. Illinois certainly needs that. And it also provides interest-free financing for local government. All of these things we need. Let's talk about this money system. I've referred to it before. Our money, virtually all of it, is created out of or what we use for money, I should say, is created out of thin air by banks when they make loans. As the loans are repaid, the money's extinguished. It's a system designed to put and keep us in debt. The result of the debt money system is what? It's debt. Here are federal debt, state debt, local government debt, 22 trillion. Personal debt, 50,000 per person. And it's impossible to pay the debt. If we have a $21 trillion government debt, we have another 16, 17 trillion in personal debt, and the money supply is 13 trillion. And we've already discussed that when you repay debt, you put money into repay debt, the money's extinguished. So it can't be used 2 or 3 or 4 times to pay the debt. It can only be used once. And the only way to actually repay the debt is for somebody else to go into debt somewhere. So it's just a crazy system. It doesn't work. Here's Stephen Zarlenga, the director of the American Monetary Institute. And when Stephen over there on the right-hand side of the screen, that's when he started to research the debt money system. Didn't even realize it was a debt money system, I don't believe, when he started his research. And then we can see what happened when he found out what a criminal system it was, what it did to him. So he wrote his book, The Lost Science of Money. And it's right here, and we're going to give you a commercial for it. Go to the American Monetary Institute website. This is for those that are not here and are watching this on a video. And read some of the material there. Order this book and read it. This will give you like a doctorate degree in monetary history. In fact, you'll know more than the professors. Anyway, Stephen began the American Monetary Institute. When he was writing the book, he wrote the American Monetary Act, which was what the Need Act, that was the forerunner of the Need Act when he took it to Congress, and Dennis Kucinich put it into Congress. There are 3 necessary reforms in the Need Act, and they all have to be done. Federal Reserve System becomes part of our government. Currently it is not. Many of you here know that, but many that are watching this online don't know these things. Bank creation of money as debt is decisively stopped. Banks will only loan money that already exists, and the federal government creates and spends into existence U.S. money. This is what most people think the system is. Intuitively, this is what the system should be. It's what we think it is, but it isn't this. And that's all the Need Act is doing, is bringing us back to where it should be. Now, the Federal Reserve claims to be an independent institution, yet all of their 12 Federal Reserve banks are wholly owned by the private banks in their districts. All of their top-level people, Board of Governors, Federal Open Market Committee, exclusively Wall Street insiders and academics that are vetted in the system. So the system is independent, and it's independent of the people of this country. The Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals, Lewis versus U.S. in 1982, ruled Federal Reserve banks, now for the purposes of the Federal Tort Claims Act, because that's what they were ruling on, quote, are not federal instrumentalities, but are independent, privately owned, and locally controlled corporations. This is not a matter of debate. So how much does it cost to produce our currency in coin? This is right off the Federal Reserve website here. So for currency, they get the currency from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, a federal institution, and it charges the board, this is the Federal Reserve Board, it charges the board for the cost of production. So how much is that? For a $1 bill or a $1 note, they pay the federal government 5 cents, and for a $100 note, they pay them 14.3 cents. Now, the only real money within this system that is not created as debt are the coins in our pockets and your piggy banks, because the reserve banks purchase coin at face value. So our government gets more for a quarter than they do for a $100 bill within this system. They get 14.3 cents for a $100 bill. And most of the money is not coins, and most of the money is, it's only a few percent, is not coins or the bills. Most of the money is just transactions, blips on a screen of a computer that are kept track by the bank, and they don't even give us 14 cents for that. A last note about the Fed. The Fed does return its income after it pays stockholders, the private banks, their share 6%, and after they pay their cost of doing business, it returns that to the federal government. So that's good, but the private banks that are making the majority of the money, and certainly all the decisions in this. They don't. They get to keep all the money that they realize in the money creation business. So here we have an academic, Dr. Kiro Yamaguchi there, because that's what I thought about this. I'd met Stephen, and we had talked, we'd worked with things during the Occupy movement and stuff, and I didn't think the conference was for a regular guy like me that stands on a street corner and screams about things. I thought this was just for professors and things like that. And nothing could be further from the truth. We need, in monetary reform, we need academics, and we also need, I wanted you to make sure that you recognize me here with the hat. We need guys on a street corner, and not just guys on the street corner. We need us to talk to our families about this, talk to our friends about this, and just make this known in our society, because nobody's going to do this for us. This is our work. Nobody's going to do it for us. We can get some to join us, but nobody will do it for us. Dr. Yamaguchi put in, he'll be talking to the conference, but he put this, he's one of the top guys in the systems dynamics computer modeling. And he put his stuff in there, the NEED Act. It was before the NEED Act was written. He put it into his computer model and said, yes, the national debt can be paid off and the infrastructure can be done, and we can do this without any inflation. Let's do it. So we also had monetary fresh air from Britain, and that was the establishment. This, again, was the Bank of England. Stephen alluded to this article, Money Creation in the Modern Economy, couple of years ago. The article explains how the majority of money in the modern economy is created by commercial banks making loans. Exactly what I've told you. Whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. Exactly what we've been saying. This is the Bank of England. This is what the Federal Reserve System was modeled after when it was created. And then it goes on. The reality of how money is created today differs from the description found in some economic textbooks. Rather than banks receiving deposits when households save and then lending them out, bank lending creates deposits. So not only are we right about what we're saying here about the bank lending creating all of our money, or virtually all of our money, but we're also saying, not we're saying, the Bank of England is saying that they've been lying to us about it. This gentleman, Martin Wolf, is the lead economic writer for the Financial Times, and a couple of years ago, the title of his column was "Strip Private Banks of Their Power to Create Money." He went on to endorse the forerunner of the NEED Act, which was the Chicago Plan, which we talked about a little bit before. And here, I got this at the conference last year, the year before, and this is a copy of the Chicago Plan. It has some handwritten notes on it by one of the guys that did it. Yes.
He also has a big section in his recent book.
Who's that?
Martin Wolf.
Oh, Wolf? Okay, I didn't read his book, yeah. Very good, thank you, Mark. And then Stephen also mentioned the Chicago Plan Revisited, Professors Bennis and Kumhoff from the International Monetary Fund. They came to the same basic conclusion as Yamaguchi's work, and their conclusion was that the reforms that we have in the NEED Act, they weren't referencing the NEED Act, they were referencing redoing the Chicago Plan, would much better control business cycle fluctuations, wouldn't have those recessions and depressions, that kind of just wreak havoc with people's lives, completely eliminate bank runs. What does that mean? That means if we had this kind of a monetary system, there would have been no need to bail out banks in 2008. No need at all, because we wouldn't have a bank run. Dramatically reduce public debt, dramatically reduce private debt, and inflation drops to zero. What's not to like about that? This gentleman, Henry Simons here, he made the great statement, the mistake lies in fearing money and trusting debt. He was one of the guys behind the Chicago Plan. He was from the University of Chicago. Then we also had Paul Douglas. These were all the ones that wrote the Chicago Plan, worked on the Chicago Plan. Paul Douglas from the University of Chicago. He became a United States Senator from Illinois, We wouldn't have the Civil Rights Act today if it wasn't for Paul Douglas. So he did a lot of good things. Irving Fisher from Yale, Frank Graham from Princeton, Earl Hamilton from Duke, Wilfred King from New York University, Charles Whittlesley from Princeton. These were the ones that wrote the Chicago Plan. And what he means, what Simons means, our system, mistake lies in fearing money and trusting debt. We trust a system in which our money is created as debt, and we're afraid of a system in which money is real money and we wouldn't all be in debt. What a crazy thought, huh? So they sent this Chicago plan out. This is during the Depression. They sent it out to the university economists. They didn't all answer, but the ones that answered, 320 university economists answered to it, and 76% fully supported exactly what we're doing here, the NEED Act of its day. They supported it. 8% supported it with reservations. That's 84% support. Only 16% opposed it. And my question is why do the economists not endorse the NEED Act today? Most of them probably don't even know about it. But why aren't they writing about it? Why aren't they discussing this? Is this good or bad? You can't just ignore this, not with all the problems we have in the world today that are not being addressed, that can't be addressed because we don't have the money for it. This gentleman, Jonathan Adair Turner, he's a British guy. He was the head of the pensions committee, all sorts of economic committees in Great Britain, and he gave a talk to the Stockholm School of Economics, real prestigious economics school, and this was a big deal, his talk. And here's some of the things he said. Modern textbooks assumptions are dramatic and wrong. Again, they're lying to us. They tend to assume what banks do is take deposits from household depositors and lend it to borrowers. No, they don't. We don't do that. It misses the insight that banks create credit and money and purchasing power. It even goes on here. That ignores almost entirely the fact that most credit extension is no longer funding business capital projects. So it's not even doing any good, most of the credit extension, money creation that the banks are doing, because what is it funding if it's not funding factories and things? It's funding wars, it's funding speculation, it's funding bubbles. That's their system. We'll skip through that one. So I thought of a way, we were talking about social justice earlier, and to understand social justice, it helps to understand what social injustice is. That's a good way to look at it. These are social injustice, wars. Poverty. This was, I know many of these people here, a protest at Federal Plaza, just a couple blocks away, ladies and gentlemen. Get over there every now and then to exercise our constitutional rights to protest our government. So anyway, poverty here. Here's some people standing in line for food bags here for Christmas dinner. Homeless man. These are social justice issues. The Pope is taking a stand against social justice. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development ranks the U.S. third worst in inequality and poverty out of 30 member nations. We're ahead of only Mexico and Turkey. That's a pretty sad fact, ladies and gentlemen. This graph is a little hard to see here from a distance, but basically we're way down here, United States, and this is a whole host of different social justice issues. Social justice, people deserve enough to live on for their work. This is the Piketty-Say's study here. And if you look at that far left-hand column, that's bottom 90%, lost 10.7%. I'll go over here. I think there's a thing there. Anyway, 90% of the people over this 10-year period from 2002 to 2012 lost 10% of their income. And over here, this isn't the 1%, this is the 1/100th of 1%, 1 out of every 10,000 people. They got 76% of their income increase. And you know what? That only counts a little bit of what they got, because they're not counting capital gains, and a lot of them, that's the majority of their income is capital gains. So they like this system of bank-created money. National Low-Income Housing Coalition, you can't afford to rent a house today at minimum wage. In fact, you need more than twice the minimum wage. Not a house, but an apartment. No state can a full-time minimum wage worker afford a place to live. Now, this is really something that it's just unbelievable. You know, we had a financial recovery here. I've heard politicians tell us that we've had a recovery in this country. Have you heard that? Some politicians saying things about the recovery, talking about the recovery. Anyway, the wealth, these figures are from the Credit Suisse Global Wealth Data Book, and this is a respected economic institution, bank, whatever, from Switzerland. They compile figures. They got the figures from the Federal Reserve. Anyway, our wealth went up from 46 trillion to 85 trillion from 2008 to 2015. That's in the United States. You know what that comes out to for each person in the country? $122,500 for each person in the country. That's $490,000 for a family of four. If this money had been, if this wealth, not money, but if this wealth had been divided evenly amongst us, and the millionaires and billionaires, they still would have got their $122,500 each. Everybody would have benefited. How much did your family receive? Mine came out a little on the short end of that wealth distribution. This is another a good one here. And this was a Harvard, couple of Harvard profs did. And if we look at the center, how do Americans think wealth is divided? And that's the center one here. The top, this is in 20% groups. So the top 20% would have about almost 60%. That's how people thought it should be. That's how they thought it was. This is how the 5,000 people were in the survey. This is how they'd like it to be. Almost equal, not quite, but almost equal. And this is how it really is. The top 20% has about 85%, and the next 20% has almost all the rest. The third 20% has enough maybe to scrape by, and the bottom 40% aren't even on the chart. So this is, when we talk about social injustice, this is what we're talking about. We have to address these things. And if the system that we have in place, a monetary system in which our money is created as debt by banks and they decide what money is created for, gives us these results, we have to change it. We have the fourth highest wealth inequality in the world. We're better than Russia, Ukraine, and Lebanon, and I think there are over 190 countries in the world that are ahead of us then. Our real unemployment rate is 23% from shadowstats.com. John Williams was a former government official, and he wanted to get some truth out, so he went into business himself to release figures. And counting, because I was unemployed for a while, and I went to the Work One office, and I went through and attended all the workshops and seminars and applied for jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's who this bottom 5%, this is the official figure, 5% unemployment. They're counting people that are getting unemployment benefits. That's basically the only ones that are counted here. But people that are working part-time that need a full-time job, and people that are no longer going to the Work One office to register and jump through the hoops because they're not getting any funds from them. So they're not counted, and they are derisively referred to as no longer looking for work. That's what really gets me. Okay, here we go. 62% of America's teachers regularly see kids who come to school hungry. This is a crime. A crime, ladies and gentlemen. Child poverty rate, can you believe it? 32% of United States children are living in poverty. And this is UNICEF figures, so I guess we can trust them. And even the best off country here, Norway, still has 5% in poverty. There's no reason any kids should be in poverty. Foreclosures, 9 million families were foreclosed on by this recession, Great Depression we're in right now. And this is a couple of years ago, this figure. I haven't seen later figures because they don't really publish them. And that doesn't mean 9 million people. That means about 30 million people were affected by that. Here, they're thrown out on the streets there. This lady's been thrown out of her condominium. Another thing that you never even think of, I was compiling this, is that if an apartment owner goes bankrupt and is foreclosed on, they throw the tenants out and they lose their security deposit and everything. So let's look at social justice as an explanation versus social injustice. Social justice is peace. Social injustice, war, militarism, empire. Social justice is a fair system where everyone has a chance. And social injustice is a rigged system. The cards are stacked in favor of the rich. Social justice, no one's left completely behind. And social injustice, creation of an ever-expanding class of have-nots and debt slaves. Social justice, no one gets so far ahead that they lose sight of their brothers and sisters. And social injustice, wealthy have trillions of dollars and the rest of us have debt. Social justice, caring and cooperation are the hallmarks of society. And social injustice, market worship and competition are the hallmarks of society. Social justice, our Mother Earth is cared for and sustained. Social injustice, destruction of our Mother Earth is outsourced as an externality of production. Social justice, the NEED Act gives people in government economic freedom. Social injustice, debt-based monetary system that consigns us to endless debt slavery. So only the NEED Act gives us what we need. It's good for progressives, it's good for conservatives, it's good for all Americans. Here, Bernie Sanders was calling for infrastructure. Of course we need it. American Society of Civil Engineers, $3.6 trillion needs to be spent over 5 years on our infrastructure. I'm kind of hurrying through some of this now, ladies and gentlemen. Only the NEED Act can rebuild the infrastructure, it does so debt-free, puts it minimum 10 million to work at good-paying jobs. Only the NEED Act pays off the federal debt. This is, I've got some of these I can pass out to you here. Result of a debt money system that's tone deaf to the environment. And I think it's necessary to talk to. It isn't just, this is some scientists that put this together, a whole bunch of them here. And it was in a book, The Ecological Rift, Capitalism's War on Earth, by John Bellamy Foster, Brett Clark, and Richard York. And I compiled a graph here, 9 planetary boundaries crucial to human life on Earth. And when these boundaries are crossed, then we can't go back to where we were before. So already, so it isn't just climate change. So you've got climate change, biodiversity loss, and nitrogen cycle. These are all already breached the boundaries. Phosphorus cycle, ocean acidification have been almost breached. Now the nitrogen, phosphorus cycles, and ocean acidification deal with the poisoning of our water, especially our oceans, you know. Freshwater use, that refers to the percentage of fresh water that's used by man, and if we go to too high a percentage and we breach the boundary, that will result in the loss of ecosystems. The same thing with land percentage used as crops. So we can only do so much of these things without crossing boundaries that who knows what will ever happen to the earth after that. And then chemical pollution includes everything up to and including nuclear pollution. And there's no measurement on that, but we know that that is really a huge issue. Atmospheric aerosol loading, that refers to particulate matter in the atmosphere. And I have asthma. Lots of people have breathing difficulties. Here's the graph. I'll pass some of these out to you here. I put this in, I gave a talk at Indiana University in Gary, and I put this together for that. So these planetary boundaries are in danger of being breached. It isn't just climate change. And what I'm getting at is that none of these things can be addressed unless we take control of our money system. Unless we have a democratic money system where we the people decide, yeah, okay, it's real serious that our kids are growing up and they can't breathe, so maybe we got to cut down on the particles in the atmosphere, or maybe we got to cut down on the nuclear pollution, or whatever, all of these things. But if we don't control our money system, we can't do it because we don't have funding to do it, and there's no profit in it. Militarism, that can only be addressed by taking care of the first profit center for war, and that's the money that the banks create and then loan it to our governments to fight wars and to build up the militaries. So moving forward on the NEED Act, it's not for the weak of heart. Not a single member of Congress from the two corporate political parties supports it, and I'm going to say that's not a negative thing. And you're going to say, what? That's not bad. In August 2016, Congress's approval rating was 13%, ladies and gentlemen. 82% disapproval rating in last year. They don't even list the disapproval rating now. Okay, we're just about done here. Okay, one last thing here, and then we're going to have questions. Okay, and we talked about all three reforms have to be done for the NEED Act. The Bank of England was nationalized, but what happened after the Bank of England was nationalized? Money creation reverted to the other private banks, and they went back to all the money was being created by the private banks. So you can't just do number one. In Jackson and Van Buren, they revoked the second bank of the U.S.'s charter, which stopped the bank creation of money. It also effectively ended the central bank for England. But because they didn't understand money and didn't create debt-free money, they brought on the panic of 1837. And the last one, the greenbacks were created under Lincoln to fight the Civil War and save the nation, and they did that. But because they didn't stop the banks from creating money, reform number 2, they didn't stop that. The bankers eventually got the upper hand and quashed the greenbacks. I'm sorry I ran a little bit over time. We have time for questions now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.